By February 1915, the war effectively came to a grinding halt. It did so for a number of reasons. First of all, just the weather. European armies campaign in the summer, they rest in the winter. They go into a sort of valley forge. I'm recording this on a very rainy, gray day. As I look out my window, the rain is falling, my backyard is flooding. You're not going to move men or material over this sort of field, especially in the lowlands of Flanders. So there's a seasonal reason why war tapered off in the early months of 1915. There's a second reason. All of Europe's armies had prepared for a short war. They had munitions and materiel to last maximum, they thought, 3 months. The war had lasted far longer than anyone had imagined. Not only are they've run out of ammunition, the barrels on the artillery are getting sloppy, the men's boots are beginning to fall apart, all while they are in the middle of a muddy field. So we call this the munitions crisis, and this munitions crisis, although it's much more than that, will force all of the belligerents to think about war in the long term, ramping up war production, converting from industries from civilian to military purposes, doing the sorts of things that you have to do when you're in it for the long haul. Beyond seasonal, beyond the munitions crisis, there's also a crisis of manpower. This affects Germany and France least because they have the largest armies with the planned mobilization. In the East, the Russian and Austro-Hungarian armies, as they had existed before the war, effectively ceased to exist, as the professional officers and NCOs and enlisted men were ground down and lost in the Galician campaigns, and both Austria-Hungary and Russia will have to mobilize huge reserves of men in new drafty peasant armies. This is different to have a drafty army, a conscript army, as opposed to a small, well-trained professional army. There's just night and day. Ask anybody who experienced the American draft army of Vietnam era and what we have now. And I think any of those people of the Colin Powell generation will tell you it's much better to have professional men involved. So this is a substantial change in military culture that the Austrians and the Russians will have to undertake. Interestingly, the British as well, because the British expeditionary force, the standing army, was relatively small. Its purpose was service in the colonies, in Asia, in Egypt, in Ireland. And although it was many people considered the most highly trained, professionalized of the regular armies, it was very small, and the dispatching of the BEF to France, which saved the day in the Schlieffen offensive, that army has disappeared, and a new army will have to be recruited. Alone amongst the belligerents, the British did not have conscription, so they relied on volunteers. And it's in 1915 that we'll see the genesis of the PALS armies, the PALS phenomenon that you'll have read about in your readings, where groups of men wholesale will march to the recruiting office. And part of the way that Lord Kitchener and the Imperial War Staff did was to get people in, was to promise you could serve with your friends. And so you have whole neighborhoods of young men enrolling together. You have the post office rifles. You have the Oxford rifles. You'll have different groups of individuals and students who all go in together. They all go into the same units together. Unfortunately, as the British will find out at the Somme in 1916, they all die together. But in any case, so we have season, we have munitions, we have manpower. In this lull, as the fronts began to stabilize, more so in the west than in the east, as the fronts began to stabilize within the military, civilian, intelligentsia, government official hierarchy of each of the powers, people began to think about a way around this stalemate. Now, one was to gain new allies. And a just absolutely horrific bidding war goes on over who will get the Italians to join. Now, the Italians were one of the central powers. They were, before 1914, in theory, allied by treaty with Germany and Austria-Hungary. When the war broke out, Italy refused to honor its treaty, claiming that that the treaty was a defensive alliance and the Germans and the Austrians were acting offensively. And so both the Central Powers and the Entente will engage in a bidding war, trying to bribe Italian politicians and influence Italian journalists to advocate for one side or the other. The radical socialist journalist, head of the Italian Socialist Party's newspaper, Avanti, a young Benito Mussolini, will be suborned by the French into supporting the Allied cause. And for this he'll lose his editorship and be expelled from the Italian Socialist Party. Ultimately, you know where Benito Mussolini ends up. So there's that going on. There was the First Lord of the Admiralty, Sir Winston Churchill, Winston, not Sir at that time, just an absolute idea generator, came up with or supported the idea of attacking the soft underbelly of the Central Alliance by a campaign in the Dardanelles to try to open up the straits for southern support for the Russians, and we have the whole Gallipoli campaign, of which you will have read and seen so much in this section. So there are attempts strategically to broaden the board. Also, tactically, there are new weapons and new opportunities developed. One is poison gas. And I think in your readings you'll see some of the other tactical attempts. One that sort of is between strategic and tactical is the advent of submarine warfare, advocated by the Easterners in the German General Staff that I discussed in the last module. So, all sorts of opportunities to work around the stalemate of the front. Oh, and before I leave, I should say one other, as well as poison gas. There was the invention of this rolling behemoth thing that was given the code name of the tank. The first tanks were developed not by the British Army, but rather under the supervision of the British Navy by that same sort of eccentric genius, Winston Churchill. Great hope was placed on tanks as it was for poison gas. Ultimately, the British wouldn't learn how to actually use them until 1918, when they did do some good. So all sorts of opportunities and attempts to circumvent this stalemate that had developed in a number of ways on both fronts. Thank you.